Forum speaker is coming from, and where I am coming from is literally the other side of the world. I was raised in a Muslim third world country. It's a secular state, but Islam is the majority religion, and there's the constant pressure there for the state to adopt and enforce the religion. And every time that happens, the minority religions like Christianity experience church burnings, violence, sometimes even death. So coming from that perspective, I really believe in the First Amendment and in the separation of church and state with the free speech and free exercise clauses. This is an important treasure that we have in our country. It's important for all of us to guard. Different ones of us come from slightly different perspectives, but as we begin the discourse, I think it's important to realize that the same treasure is important to all of us. Personally, I am an evangelical. I'm an attorney. I practice in this area of religious liberties and constitutional law. In an educational institution, I tell you with a little bit of trepidation that I'm an evangelical. I read a study that was done a few years ago by a Jewish group that wanted to explore the extent to which anti-Semitism still lingers in our universities. And they discovered, somewhat to their shock, that there wasn't any anti-Semitism, but that the majority of university professors had the bias that evangelicals were stupid. So I hope that if you have any such bias, you will set that aside for the evening. And I'll admit freely that I'm an evangelical, and that's the religious perspective that I'm coming from. So as we're thinking about this whole topic of religion in schools and what kids do, what teachers do, I thought it might be fun to start with some hypotheticals and maybe center around one of my fellow evangelicals, Tim Tebow. So bear with me. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. I don't think anybody's been taking notes. You probably can't take notes, right? Just to get a sense of where we are as an audience. So, should a student in a public school be able to take a TiVo in the classroom? Hands for yes? Should a student in a public school, a high school student, be able to take a TiVo in the classroom?
What's that?
What is that? For those of us that don't have television.
And I thought I was the only one in Colorado who wasn't following football. I don't watch it much, but my understanding is that it's to bend your knee and bow your head in a silent prayer momentarily. Have I got that right, Bruce? And my husband to correct me here. So, should a student be able to make an outward expression of silent prayer? Yes?
Depends on where the classroom.
Well, yeah, non-disruptively.
Okay, good question. While the teacher's teaching?
Absolutely not.
No. During a social time in between classes? Okay.
Not the hallway, because then someone's going to trip over them.
Good point. How about out on the soccer field? How about someone who was doing it to mock a Christian student, doing it in imitation? Okay, got some yeses, got some nos. What about a teacher doing it, or a coach? What about a teacher or coach doing it at their own child's soccer game on the weekend?
That's weird.
Now that's one important thing about this area of law, is that what we each think is weird tends to drive the analysis, and it's hard not to let it to. When Tebow was playing at University of Florida, what if he wanted to tattoo John 3:16 on his arm? Is that okay? Should the school have made him cover it up if he had? No? Okay. Okay, back to our public high school. Should they let Tebow come be a motivational speaker at the school assembly?
On what basis?
Okay. the next question, should the speech be scripted? Should he be able to say anything he wants to? So the speech should be scripted to some extent.
Scripted by, should be reviewed if that's necessary.
Okay, well, then I think that's what I mean, that the topics be pre-approved. What if a student asked him a question about his faith?
Answer honestly.
Okay. Can he say what his faith background is? Can he share his faith in any sort of detail?
What do you mean by share?
Say what he believes? Can he say what I just said? Okay. So there doesn't seem to be any sense that he has to hide who he is, but maybe that he can't preach it to students. Okay. How about if it was a sports banquet for the football team? Same thing? Okay, let's change the sports banquet. It's a private banquet that the parents put together.
Did the parents decide?
The parents decide. Some people say, well, by definition, it's not private.
If it's a football team, it's not private.
Right.
Well, they just got together. They rented a place. They invited everybody on the football team.
Is it still a public school football team?
It's the kids from the public school football team, party thrown by parents.
Then same rules as it was in public school.
Okay? And we'll try and speak to that issue a little bit later. And I probably don't want to take any more time on that, but I think that kind of example helps you explore some of the principles that are involved. The public schools have taken on the education of children, and you can't educate someone without molding their belief structure, at least to some extent. And this is actually on the Supreme Court opinion. So most of the law in this area is U.S. Constitution, the Free Exercise Clause, the Colorado Constitution allows for freedom of religion. And other than that, it's mostly case law coming out of the different circuits. There's some commonality in the case law. There's some differences, especially in the legal test. And I'm not going to get into the fine points of the legal test tonight, because they're very case-specific. They're hard to explain, and frankly, they get a little boring when they're divorced from the facts. But we have the First Amendment. The words are, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, of course that's our Establishment Clause, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridge the freedom of speech, which ties into it. So there are a number of different free exercise tests. There's the establishment test, and the 10th Circuit reads something like this, if you're evaluating the government conduct. Was the government conduct motivated by an intent to endorse religion? So you've got an intent piece. Does the conduct actually have the effect of endorsing the religion? So an effect piece. And if the government is involved with some kind of religious institution, is there excessive entanglement? So the entanglement piece. And just keep that in mind as we go through. We'll go through about 5 different areas and factual patterns. I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on the time here, but I think we'll find it that. The Equal Access Act is one of the few statutory acts that covers student speech. And it was passed in order to allow student religious groups access to public high schools. Now, it doesn't apply to public elementary schools, it doesn't apply to public universities, it's pretty much a high school thing. The meetings have to be voluntary and student-led. There can't be any sponsorship of the meeting by the school or any government employee. Student employees may be present, and usually they are just to kind of make sure everything's in order, but as non-participants. The meeting cannot materially and substantially interfere with educational activities, and outside persons, such as Tim Tebow, can come to speak or occasionally, but they can't come regularly, they can't attend or direct the meeting.